All right. Good morning. Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, Chris?
Pretty good. Pretty good. We'll give people a few seconds
Cool.
to file in. So we're here,
Cool.
another self-isolation. This time, this feels weird, to be honest. I'm interviewing up owner Rob Cesta, and we're going to do some bass flies. Is that right?
We are, yeah, going to show case some how to tie some easy poppers. Poppers have always been something that I've always been intimidated tying in the past, but then I've sort of realized that modern products and like the simple techniques can make popper tying super fast and efficient for really effective flies. And if you look at a lot of poppers, they have like their epoxied heads. There's crazy paint jobs on them. There's rubber legs going through the foam or there's spun deer hair, and that's a lot of work and time. But if you want to make some easy poppers, it's really quick. So that's what we want to showcase today is how easy this can be.
Terrific. Nice. And yeah, lots of different platforms out there allow people to get creative without investing a ton of time. So yeah,
Oh yeah, exactly.
talk a bit about
Yeah.
that. That'll be good.
Mhm.
That'll be good. Very nice product placement there with your Sage mug.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, check this out.
Very
They're for sale
casual.
at driftoutfitters.com. Yeah.
Nice. Right on. Well, we've got a few people in already, so if you want to hop into it, I don't know if there's anything in particular you want to talk about leading into this in terms of how you fish poppers. I know you have a lot of theory on sort of how you fish poppers, when, where, and all that. I don't know if you want to talk through that as you're tying them, or
For sure, we can do a bit of an intro. You can let other people join in as we go through this ramble. But the few things I definitely look for in poppers, if I'm buying them or tying them, and one thing is the hook gap. That's a huge thing for me. I've seen a ton of poppers being tied or available in other shops where the gap between the foam at the bottom of the head and the hook point is really fine and small. There's very little space for a hook to actually embed into a fish. If it's very, very short and very small, you have a smaller chance of hooking that. If you look at like modern bass flies or jigs for conventional gear, they're using huge hooks with massive gap. So why are we using tiny, tiny hooks with tiny, tiny gaps? It doesn't make any sense. We should definitely learn, pick information from both worlds and use what's the best out there. So when I'm tying a popper, I want to maximize that gap as much as I can. I will go through a few techniques how to do that using some of my preformed popper heads. They're super easy to use, so that's a great one. Sharp hooks are something as well. You have to have super sticky sharp hooks. So if they're not sharp off the bat, get a file and hone those down to make sure that they are super sticky sharp. We actually should make a video about how to hone your hooks as well, so we can put that on deck for you guys to learn. Another thing I look for is, well, just buoyancy, how the popper is going to sit in the water. This fly, for example, you can't tell that it's out of water now, but it's actually going to keel back and sit just in the water and sort of pop forward and make a little popping and jerk motion. So it's about what the fly does and how you build it. Another one is it's really not often thought about, but if you look at a conventional popper with like a hard epoxy coating, that feels like a piece of wood. It feels like a piece of plastic. And if you were to feed me or Chris a piece of plastic, we spit it out in a heartbeat. But if you feed us gummy bear, we might actually hold on to it for a few more seconds, just because it actually feels like something. If you look at squirming worm material, it's soft and gushy, and it feels like a worm or something that could be edible versus like a stick or a rock or a piece of a pipe cleaner. So these heads that I'm using today, actually, they're fairly soft. So if you get a pretty aggressive take, that fish will grab it and squeeze it. And if you ever squeeze a baitfish or something in nature, it does give versus being a hard stick. So you may get a few more moments of grab versus just kind of a quick rejection. So that's a great one too. Another one is if you tie your poppers with too much buoyancy. I tied one here with a massive head versus a smaller head. This one is going to float higher. Absolutely. It's going to pop a little better. But the way a fish feeds is that it comes up to your fly unless it's going to charge at your fly, which actually is an issue. But a fish will open its mouth and suck this down, or even in the water, if it's a streamer, it's going to come by and suck it in. If this is too resistant to water or motion in water, if it's too bulky, too buoyant, that fish is going to have a heck of a hard time sucking that fly down. So you have a ton of buoyancy here, which actually may stop this from going into a fish's mouth. Well, this one here has lower buoyancy, but can be sucked down way easier. So there's a ton of little factors here when you're looking at poppers and tying poppers and buying poppers for how they work. Castability, another huge factor as well. This casting this on a 6 weight versus this on a 6 weight, you're looking at a massive difference in terms of in terms of ability there as well. Way more air resistance, way more weight. Looking at something that's fairly like a lot more streamlined than this guy as well. So there's a number of factors there that you really want to look at. There's one more, but I'll get to that as we're tying. I'm sure I'll remember it. Kind of slips my mind at the moment. Too much to talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move my camera a little closer and get to tying a few very basic flies. Show you some very easy tricks. And the first popper I'm going to tie is, I think, the simplest popper you'll ever see in your entire life.
Perfect.
It takes a super quick amount of time to tie. It's not complex. Most of the materials, maybe except for the hook and for the foam, you have at home already. So you don't need to go and put a huge investment into your gear. So let's get this camera set up just appropriately here. And Chris, can you tell me how that looks?
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah.
Cool, great. So I'm going to start off by inserting a hook into my vise, and I'll talk through all the products I'm using as well, so you have a good idea of why I'm choosing that product, what we like to use at the shop. The hook I'm going to use is actually an Ahrex curved salt hook. The reason I use this hook is because it's a very short shank, so it reduces the amount of weight on this hook. If it's a very long shank, I'm going to have a lot of weight to actually hold up, so very short. What also have is also a fairly large gap here as well. It does curve up a little bit, which is just fine because there's going to be an established gap right here, which is quite substantial. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into my Renzetti saltwater clamp here, or vise. I like this guy because it actually has bigger jaws. You could actually use this in the standard Traveler. The saltwater version is awesome because this holds those hooks a little better, and we're using some way bigger hooks today as well. So it's going to hold it very, very nicely.
You're putting that
right on.
Really high up, sort of on the hook there.
Here, yeah, I like to, just a personal preference of mine. It does run in line with the shaft as well. So if you do want to rotate this, it will actually rotate in line as well. You can adjust it if you want to, bring it down, grip it a little further down, even have it up as well. This is strong. It's going to hold it wherever you put it.
All right, cool. Just wondering if there's a story behind it.
No, just putting in the vise. That's all. Right on. Cool. So even to showcase what this popper looks like before I even tie it, I have a couple of examples here. Black and chartreuse, wicked little color combination. Black's a little hard to see on the camera, but that's great. And this one here is an orange fashion. It's Marabou, Krystal Flash, and a popper head and a set of eyes. So super easy. Anyone can tie these. If you can tie a woolly bugger, you're actually overqualified to tie this fly. Next thing we're going to use is the double barrel popper heads from Flymen Fish Company. These are the pre-formed, pre-shaped. These things pop amazingly well. If you take a look at them, there's like a little bevel inside. They're not standard popper shapes. They push water in a really fun way. They're great. You can tie these two ways, and we'll actually tie them two ways, the standard popper forward way, and then also the slider type way as well. Really, really, really cool product. Huge fan of this. Next one is Krystal Flash, because who doesn't like Krystal Flash? Bass love Flash. And also just some Strung Marabou. So that's all we're going to use besides some thread and some eyes as well. I think 3mm eyes fit onto these. These are the small bodies. Cool. So before I even put my thread on, I'm going to use a fairly strong thread. I don't want to break, so I'm using the Veevus power thread. It's strong as heck. It absorbs glue quite well, which is really good. If I use things like GSP, I find that, or gel spun, is that it doesn't absorb as much glue and it's too slick. I find this is a little more coarse and will actually offer some better holding with the glue onto the popper head.
Yep.
So
the 140 or the 240?
This one is the 140. Yeah, 240 would be pretty big. So I'll go with this here. Now the popper head, these come without a hole in them. There's a small little guide back here for a hole, as you can see. But the front is absolutely non-established for a hole. Now, when you do put this on, you have a choice of either going right through the center, which is one option. You can go and sort of angle it down if you want to. I'm not sure why you would do that. But what I like to do is put a hole with a bodkin through the popper head as close to the bottom as I can without piercing the bottom. What that'll do is it'll give me way more gap down here. If I lower this down, even go midway through, I'm obstructing that gap once again. So I'm taking all this time and effort to find hooks that give me the most gap. So I don't want to close this down. I want to open that as much as I can. So I center this, I take my bodkin, center it in the mouth of the popper, and I'll push it just underneath. This is a bit of a tricky thing. I hope I don't stab myself on camera, but I'm tough. I'm not going to cry, hopefully, if I do. But I'm going to take this, slide it right back and through, give myself a couple seconds to do this. I find twisting the bobbin does help. And if you look, I've now gone through the bottom of the popper head and out the back. So I give myself a more of an angled up type look and approach to this popper assembly.
Yep.
So I'm going to work this back and forth, get myself a little bit of extra room in that sort of hole I'm just boring out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-fit this onto my hook before the thread goes on, so I have a nice and easy application of this later on. So I'm going to squeeze this in, rotate it, and I'm going to troubleshoot any problems here I have now. Because once you get thread and glue on there and you try to do this, you're done. It's done.
Yeah, so
You're not going to withdraw it and do it again. So always check everything that you do here. This part is a little time consuming. I'll go in through one end first and then flip it around, go through the other end. You'll see I'll kind of pop it on.
now, do you
Squirmy little thing sometimes.
Do you find changing the angle of the popper, like if you do center it versus going a little lower like you are, going a little higher, do you find that it changes the actual popping action of the bug? If you put lower, does it create a larger splash? Like,
I find that it's a different splash, because what's happening is if you do angle it backwards, and the popper is going to sort of sit a little further back, is when it does come forward, it'll give you smaller little kicks and pops versus a big splash and through. It changes it a bit. I don't think it's the biggest. The biggest priority is to get the pop right, or I'm looking for a perfect pop pattern. The biggest thing for me is fish does take the fly. I want to be able to hook up on that fish. That's why I sort of raise things up there. Poppers, no matter how you look at them, they're an extremely aggressive way to fish, period. So if you have a fish that's going to commit to a popper, sort of making things a little tiny bit subtler with like a popper motion, I don't think it's going to be the make or break. If that fish is going to take, it's an aggressive fish. It's going to inquire and look at it and commit to it. So yeah, so I put this on, I've sort of bored it out, make sure it fits well, and just going to put that back on again because I want to show you a cool little trick that I figured out to really get, excuse me here, just 1 second. To get perfect placement of my body materials or my feathers and all that. Oh, it's a little stiff still, so I was going to push that through. This is real life fly tying, guys, so you can see how we can manage as experts here at the shop. Cool, so that's on there. Now, I have a very, very, very small amount of material or hook space to work with to tie on my Marabou and the Krystal Flash, and that's fine because it's a tuft and it's a few strands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of earmark where I want to stop tying by wrapping my thread just right behind that popper head right there. So I know that when I take this off now and tie my materials in, and that's the maximum distance forward that I want to go. Another way is to take a Sharpie, actually mark it on the hook with a Sharpie of where you want to be, and then start wrapping your thread there as well. Now that I have a few thread wraps already established, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to pull that popper head off. Make sure it seats very well. Let me tighten up this vise a little bit. And I know now that I'm not going to tie anything forward of this, except for my thread securing wraps I'm going to glue with the popper head on there. I'm going to take my copter scissors here, give that extra bit of a clip. That's for the clip. I'm going to find a piece of Marabou, not very much, a fairly small tuft. Even this is way too much. I'm going to really cut this down. Strip off a fair amount here, discard this in my waste bin. And looking at proportions, that's pretty darn long as well. So I'm even going to go shorter. That's a little bit long too. I'm going to shorten this up just a little bit more. And that should actually be okay there. So I'm going to switch hands so I can hold the tail, grab my thread, do a couple of securing wraps just here. Do 3 or 4 of those. That's just fine by me. I'm gonna grab my scissors, cut the remainder of the Marabou off, and then the next step is to grab my Krystal Flash, grab a few strands of this, and what I like to do is put my Krystal Flash behind the thread, pull it forward, and lift my thread up and slide the Krystal Flash right down. And that way I'm secure on the top, and I can just move these around so they flare off on the sides and not directly over the top. Over the top is not going to be too effective. So you'll have the Marabou here, and then the Krystal Flash on top, so the fish really can't see the Krystal Flash too well. Now, actually might be even a little too far back with this, but hey, that's all right. These are quick poppers. They don't need to be perfect. There we go. That's our tail of the popper here. The Krystal Flash is a little bit long. I'll get a few little clips here, just a pair of scissors. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the thread down on the front of the hook that I'm going to put glue on, and then throw the popper head back on. So here, I'm going to wrap forward. I'm going to create a fairly good thread base here that is going to absorb glue and offer some resistance in that hole too. So it's a nice tight fit, and that glue can really take hold. I'm using a very bright thread today. You can use any color of thread. I'm using chartreuse, so it's a contrasting color, so you can see exactly where my thread is. That's a pretty good thread mount here. I'm just going to do a couple of very quick 2-turn whip finish. You can do a couple half hitches if you want to. This is all going to be glued afterwards. Clip that thread off. I'm going to take the super glue. I use the Zap Thin. It really soaks it nicely, not only to the thread, but also into the popper body as well. And I do find that these Flymen Fish Company pre-molded, either the double barrels or the Howitzers and anything that they produce, this foam here, is really responsive to glue and absorbs glue very well. I've used some other popper heads in the past, and they just really don't absorb very well. And you can find that after a bit, you can sort of twist your popper head fairly easily. So take the Zap. It's already pre-opened. I'm going to put a couple of drops right here. I don't want this to be sopping and dripping with glue, but I don't want it to be fairly dry as well. I want it to be fairly saturated because I want it to absorb into the popper head as well. So take my popper head, find the right direction for my popper head, get ready because once this goes on, it's done. I'm going to slide this in, push this back as best I can, making sure that the eye of the hook comes through. And I actually might have a bit of trouble here with this one. But, oh, geez. Uh-oh, not a good start, guys. This is all right.
All right, real life, like you said.
Exactly. So what I'll do is I'm going to take my scissors, create a bit more of a hole for this, and come right through and have that harden and tighten up. Yeah, so not the perfect popper, but hey, with this real life fly tying knot, everything comes off your vise perfectly every time. So what I'm going to do next is going to have my popper head on here. It's more centered than it is in the bottom, which I usually like, which is fine. There's still quite a good gap there. I'm going to take my fingers. I'm actually going to push down and squeeze as hard as I can on that foam, do it sideways as well. So what I'm doing is I'm actually drawing that glue into the popper head, and then essentially that fly is finished. Now there are holes here for the 3mm eyes, the living eyes that they produce, and I will put those on afterwards. I like to batch my eyes and do them all at one time versus stop and put all eyes onto each one. I don't think you guys want to sit here and watch me put eyes onto a fly. That's not the fun part. So that is your very simple popper. That's Marabou, Krystal Flash, and it's a foam head. Done. Easy. Anyone can do that. If you tie a woolly bugger, you can tie this. So you can tie your own poppers at home super, super easily. Color combinations, you can do all white, all black. You can do orange and black, orange and chartreuse. Make it hot, make it dull. It's completely up to you. Now, these popper heads are also really good at accepting color as well. Now, this one's orange, so I'm not going to showcase how easy it is with orange because you can't really tell the orange with, say, chartreuse or another orange color. If you had, say, a black marker, you could take actually a Sharpie. Here we go. And you can put some Gales Blow here if you want. You can sort of strike this up a little bit, make it fun. It's a Sharpie. You can do whatever you want. You can write "bite me" on there, whatever you want to do. So have fun with this stuff. Cool. So your popper is done.
Cool.
Right on. So the next pattern I want to jump into is a little more elaborate. It looks super fishy. I can't wait to fish this pattern in the summer, and I know it's going to be killer for bass and pike, and on saltwater snook are going to absolutely destroy this fly as well. So I'm using the Howitzer head. I'll show over the fly quite easily, quickly with you. It's going to be the Howitzer head from Flymen Fish Company.
Yep.
Living eyes once again. This is a polar chenille for the body, and the tail is a wiggle tail. These things are really, really cool. They have a crazy, crazy fun action in the water, and they're great. Cool.
Before you get too far here, we do have a question on the last fly from Jordan. He was wondering if there was any particular reason that you're using the hook that you're using says the curved salt hook versus like a branded popper hook, like the Mustad popper hook is an example, I guess.
Oh, gotcha. Because they're shorter shank, and that fly way shorter shank. Also, that bevel and that little sort of kink in the popper hooks, I find can be a bit tough to navigate with the poppers, sliding them on. And I find really those hooks, I've tied them. I haven't found that they're more effective or not. I think if you have other types of popper heads, if you have like the closed cell foam from Rainy ones that are pre-slit, I think it's easier to put those on there and really clamp them down so they don't spin. But these have had zero issues. So I haven't used those popper hooks in a very, very long time. We don't sell tons of those hooks as well. I think a lot of people do tie on just a standard sort of standard shanked hook as well. We sell a fair amount, but I think
It always seems like a little bit of a hunt that everybody has to go on for every individual popper head to find like the perfect hook that fits, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I just use straight stuff. I use what's in my box in my collection here. We just play around and see how it works for you. There's popper hooks. There's actually a great example is salmon hooks, salmon fly hooks. You don't need to tie salmon flies on salmon fly hooks. You can tie them on any hooks you want. So just sort of go on that as well. It's because something's named something doesn't mean it's the perfect tool for the job. Cool. All right, so I'll start tying this fly. The hook I'm going to use today for this fly is the Daiichi XPoints. These are a size 2/0, so fairly large, very strong,
and that's
very.
That's 472. That's the really.
These are the X472s. The model right here. You can hold it up here so you can take a peek at that model. Right on. Once again, I'm going to apply this into my vise. Make sure it's very secure. Just lock it in here. Perfect. I'm going to tighten up the vise so it's not going to spin on me. Brilliant. I'm going to have to get my thread. First thing to put on is thread. So I'm going to wrap from the front. I don't need the best touching wraps in the world. It's going to be pretty rough. You can leave gaps in there. Once again, it's about speed and sort of producing a fly that is quick and effective. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Right to where the bend starts. All right, I'm going to cut my thread. Usually if I have a less strong thread, I'll just kind of rip my hand forward and pop off the thread. But this stuff is quite thick, and I'll actually hurt myself if I do that. So that's why I'm using the scissors today. You see me other time just kind of giving it a pop and taking off that tag end. The tail goes in next. This is the micro mini dragon tails from these from Whalesback. These are great. We have a bunch of these in the shop. Now, we'll say that these guys kind of get heavy. They kind of get waterlogged and they get a bit harder to cast. So you may have to bump up the weight of your fly rod you're casting this on just to be able to cast these out. These absorb a fair amount of water. So to tie this in, I'm going to find the very forward end. It's a bit of it's definitely a smaller section. You can identify exactly which is front and back. This is your tail. That's your tie-in point. I'm going to lay this onto the hook. Have a securing wrap here. Going to loosely go up and secure the entire tail along here. This thing will never leave this hook. It's going to be attached exceptionally well. Going to get back here. That's done. Next, I'm going to grab my polar chenille. You can use any color chenille. These tails come in black, chartreuse, I think oranges. I'm using white today. You could use an olive polar chenille. You could use red. It's really up to you to what you want to use. Go here. I'm going to grab a nice long swath, give this a cut.
Just noticing.
And I keep all my extras and bits for other use.
Yep. Just notice the hook that you're using here, relative to the shank length, it's quite a bit of a larger hook, but the gap isn't huge compared to the shank length.
Yes.
When you're tying,
and for this one, the reason is that the popper head I'm going to use is going to sit way more forward, so there's going to be a fairly substantial gap as well. Yeah. Cool. Right on. So I got a little ahead of myself and I didn't do my measuring technique. So I have to sort of find where this is going to sit on here. That's just, what I did today. Sort of got excited, bumped ahead of myself. Once again, real life fly tying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the hole into this now. Same technique, going right to the bottom, and making sure I have an established hole here. The Howitzer heads go on. You can actually tie in either direction. You get a bigger pop in one way and a smaller pop the other side. So I'm going to actually go use a smaller popping end for this one here. Take the bobbin, find the center, go right back and through. So I'm going to grab this. Once again, keep my fingers safe. I don't want to stab myself, especially not on camera. I'll either go straight through, so I'll just back out and go again. What you could do if you want to tie a bunch of these is to pre-stab each one. So go through all of your popper heads, just sit here and go through each one. So you're not doing this per fly. It's a bit more efficient when you're tying flies. Just going to bore this out, go on to the other side, push this through. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll push this on, make sure it fits and gets to where it needs to be. So I should have done this as my first step, so I knew where to even tie that, cut off the tail. But once again, hey, this is real life fly tying, and we don't always do things perfectly. Cool. So that's actually quite good. It's not going to obstruct anything where the tail was tied in. I'm going to, as for my own reference, grab a Sharpie and make a small mark on the thread now, or the tail, or the hook shank, to where I want to stop tying my polar chenille in. So don't go too far ahead. I have to really compress things and have a hard time getting that head on. So where my thread is already tied in, I'm going to find a core of this material. I'm going to just secure this down. A couple of loose strands aren't going to ruin this fly, so that's just fine right there. If you want to really clean this up, just grab your scissors, get rid of those couple extra strands, tie forward, leave my thread hanging where that little mark I just made is, and then start wrapping the polar chenille, drawing and pulling back the fibers that otherwise might get caught underneath the continuing forward wraps. And I'm going to do touching wraps of this and make it a fairly full body. You could go sparse if you want to, but I like the full body effect here. So do touching wraps. I'm going to go all the way forward. So far, not rocket science for any of this stuff. Just going to keep on rolling forward. Any other questions, guys?
Nothing at the moment. A reminder, if anyone does have questions, just drop them in the chat as we're going here, and we'll answer them as we go. I had a question though. Is there anything else, like I think Fuller chenille is awesome for this, but is there any other option for somebody maybe wanted more of an opaque body or a fuller body? What they might want to.
Yeah. You can use so brushes are great for this actually. So like we have brushes from RD, and we also have brushes from EP as well, and they are they're pre-dubbed brushes in a sense, where they have the body material in some wire. So we have the streamer brushes that would work. The polar fiber brushes would do a super great job of having a bit more opaque body as well. There's the translucency brush, which you're getting more in soon. So there's a ton of other options that you can have here. Like anything really can fit in here, but I like this because it's a bit flashy. It's an aggressive presentation. I got tons of flash in there, wiggly tail. This thing is kind of looks hot, but you could use a ton of other stuff there. Chris, do you have any recommendations?
Cool. No, I mean, that's kind of the list I was fishing for.
Cool, right on.
Maybe like
good pun, Chris.
Chenille, I imagine too could work too.
What's that? Sorry.
Body chenille, like the game changer chenilles.
Yeah, that would be great as well. Absolutely. Cool. So I want to trim this off, and that's where my mark was. I'm just going to wrap some more thread wraps here. Nice full body, really sparkly, really bright. I'm going to secure more thread, put more thread on the front of this hook here, just building up a little bit of a body. The thicker thread you have, the faster this goes. I wouldn't do this with like 14 or 16 odd or tiny thread. You'd be here forever building this up. And if you're just trying to build up heads fast, you can use something like the Uni Big Fly thread, which is super, super thick, and you just spin it up in heartbeat, and it's just save a bit more time. You can have it on a second spool, just burn it in. I'm using what I have today on my bobbin. I'm not going to go too crazy and change threads out for this jobby, but you definitely could if you want to have a quicker. If you're mass producing those, that might actually save you a few minutes at the end of the day. Next, once again, super glue, a popper maker's best friend. So this goes on to that thread. It's not dripping, but it's quite well saturated. I'm going to orient my popper the way I want to. This marked up side here is the back, clean end's the front. I'm just going to throw this right on. I'm going to show you a cool trick with a popper as well, so you can know where your popper is all the time. Just going to put this on here. It's well filled. It's in a good place. I'm going to take my hands once again, squeeze down, get that glue to soak into the material. Do it the other way as well. And perfect. This fly is missing its eyes, and then that fly is essentially ready to fish. Now I'm going to show you that technique about that really cool trick. Different fly as this glue dries, so I'll drop this one out, and I will grab one I tied earlier with a bit of a different color of the body of the polar chenille. But if you're fishing in a river or you're fishing in a lake and there's a foam line and it casts out into a foam line, it's really hard to see. If you have a white popper head, like how do you see this thing in white foam? It's gone, it's missing. But if you take a marker, a Sharpie, and you pop the top of this thing and you go into the front of your popper and just take this, start striking lines of color just up through the popper. I'll show you the effect afterwards. It's like applying like hot red lipstick to these things. It's absolutely awesome. You can see these things from a mile away. Cool. And there you go. Now you have a chartreuse indicator the front of your fly. I don't use this as a really a hot spot for my flies because it's going to sort of be lost. The fish is going to be sitting up and maybe a pop here and there. The fish might see it, but really this is for me to see where my popper is. If you want to put like other sharp hot lines on the top of your popper heads, that also works as well. You can take your Sharpie and really just strike some hot colors on here for you to keep track. And if you really wanted to, and to tease a fish, you could take your Sharpie and write the words, bite me, on the very bottom, and sort of tease that fish to take your popper a little bit more. So there you go. Have some fun with your poppers, guys. Cool. Next. Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Tons. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I look forward to is how thin my hook is. I want the thinnest hook possible for the job, for anything that I tie. And the reason is that a thicker hook requires more force to penetrate. So if I have a really, really super thick hook and I'm fishing with lighter tippet or lighter line or a rod or it's not very strong or I'm just in a position where I can't apply a ton of force, I really, really want the thinnest hook that I have to slip into the fish's mouth. It's, you know, if you took a super thick gauge hook and a very thin gauge hook side by side, you put a scale in each one, pull down, you'd find that the amount of force it takes to for that very thin gauge hook to like enter a piece of foam or whatever you're putting through is going to be substantially smaller in weight and force than a thicker hook. So the thinnest hook is also something as well. And unfortunately, in terms of hook sizes and makes and models, there's no standardized form out there. Sure, there's like double extra long, super short shanks, things like that, but there's no standard format. So best thing that I do is I unfortunately can't do it right now, but when you get back into the shop, grab your hooks, grab your popper head, size them up side by side and say, hey, will this give me the amount of gap that I look for? Or you can call the shop, email us, say, hey, set me up with hooks to tie a fly this long, this size, popper head this size, and make a recommendation for me. And we can definitely do that for you. That's what we do every day. So there you go. There's a fly. Yes. Yeah. I have. Yes, for sure. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, for sure. So these are so I do have Copic markers, and I bought these a while ago. These are really cool. It's more, I guess it's not ink, it's dye. Is that correct? I forget exactly what makes them super different. But what's neat is that you can actually have an airbrush tool that you can insert this into, and then you have a compressor that blows air over the top of this, and actually it takes the ink off of this or the dye off of this, and then puts it onto your popper. So it's like a spray painting almost. So I have done it. It's really cool, really fun. You can really have cool patterns. You can lay down different texture materials to spray over. So definitely we have. I think Chris has a set like the air compressor one. I actually got the air compressor myself. I have plans of making tons of poppers, and sort of time got away from me. It's a fairly long process to make those things. If you want to then put epoxy over top, so you can totally use the Copic marker system and the spray cans and all those things to make cool patterns and textures. But for myself, time is very short these days, and I just want to produce numbers of poppers versus like really make artistic poppers. Nothing wrong with that. I've done the whole artistic popper thing in the past. I love it. It's amazing. It's super fun. Because I love picking up a popper that looks really good and fishing it, but now it's more so like let me get my box full, get these poppers into my hand onto the water and catch a few fish. So nothing wrong with them. I love the artistry, but right now it's just about just producing flies for the box.
Yep, nice.
Cool.
Sorry, guys, I realized
Right on.
I had myself muted there, so you didn't hear me asking Rob questions, but I think you heard the answers.
Oh. Okay, gotcha. And one further tip before you move on is that these tails are awesome, but they do eventually unravel. They're not the most durable things in the world. So one thing that I really like to do with these to increase the durability in life is the tail. Once again, super glue. This thing is always on my tying table. Is put a few drops just on the tail. And it's going to dry and really secure all that thread material together. So I'm going to have less of a chance of this unraveling with me on the water. I think I've heard some other tricks. People put like intermittent thread wraps in there somehow. They put glue intermittently through the stuff as well. I just know that these aren't going to last long, so if they get chewed up by fish. So I just accept it. I can strip these off, retie them, save the popper heads if you kind of twist them off and really pull them out hardly. You can even split these and try to cut them out as well. But for myself, like if this gets beat up, I'm a happy guy, and that's just fine by me.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so off to the next fly. I've tied 2 so far.
One last question.
Sorry, Chris?
Sorry, did
Yes.
kill you again from Fraser again? He's asking, what epoxy do you recommend for popperheads? We haven't used epoxy today. Your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, so epoxy, now these don't need epoxy. These you can fish as are. It's not going to, I think epoxy is really used for sealing the popper head. It gives it a sheen to it and some more durability. But these are really tough. You don't need to use epoxy on these at all. They actually have it actually feels like a coating already on the outside. It's foam though, but it's not hard. And I like it to be not hard. Epoxy ends up being hard, and the fish can reject those easier because it feels unnatural. So I don't epoxy my popper heads anymore. I just accept that these might get wet, and then I'll change out my flies to a dry one and let this dry in the sun. If you're going to use epoxy and you're going to color and paint your popper heads, 5-minute epoxy causes it to bleed really badly. So you need the longer drying epoxies. So like DEFCON, I think there's a 20-minute epoxy. There's like 24-hour epoxies. Those ones are less volatile to those colors and paints and dyes. So you want the ones that are going to take a lot longer to dry. So nothing short. UV, I've tried that. Didn't like the effect. I think it actually cracked a little easier, the amount that I put on there. Yeah, and it's not cheap as well. So if you want to save a few dollars, don't put a ton of the UV epoxy. It's not cheap stuff.
So we would only use that. What you're saying is maybe if we are going to say use a Copic and paint up our poppers just to seal the colors, but for everything else, just leave it.
Oh, sorry, I think I lost you there, Chris.
Oh, did you? So basically what you're getting at is unless you're like putting a bunch of effort into maybe painting a cool design and stuff, which is debatable if that really has any effect on the effectiveness, then you wouldn't bother.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Cool. But nothing wrong with doing it. It's a lot of fun. If you want to keep those colors and the design preserved, absolutely go for it. But these days, it's a quick tie for me. Actually, was going to reference and actually show off like a conventional bass popper, which I forgot with my other gear. But a conventional bass popper, if you look at a lot of them, sure, they have like body designs. A lot of them have sort of like 3 stages of color, 2 stages of colors. They're monocolored, monochromatic, but they don't have a ton of body material after that. It's a hard body without a ton of stuff behind there. So if you look at poppers from conventional world and fly world, you can see there's huge differences based upon like the materials and movements. But I do love the fact that in flies, that we have mobile materials on them. So if this sits in the water, you have to fly with rubber legs. This is going to sit in the water and just move and undulate a little bit more and be more seductive. So I think we actually have an edge over a lot of conventional poppers than with flies. So cool.
While you're doing that, I actually threw up a photo of one, so I think folks got the idea.
Cool, solid.
Yeah.
Right on. So the next pattern, a little more dressed up. So this has a little bit more going on to it. We have rubber legs, Krystal Flash, and some craft fur. Once again, just tying in on a longer hook to show on some more tie-in effects of the popper and what you can actually do with them. Hot colors, chartreuse. You can do whites again, black, whatever you want to. Go crazy, have fun with them. But same thing using the double barrel popper heads. Once again, you get to see a recurring theme. I love these pre-formed popper heads. They're really easy to use and make this really quick. I feel like I should be on a daytime like sales show. Hey guys, slices and dices. But I really do love these things.
I can answer this quick question from Mitch, who's asking about the wiggle tails. Yes, they do come in different sizes. Rob is using the mini ones. Is that right?
Today I was using the micro.
Sorry. Yeah, they come in different sizes. You can trim them to a certain extent, but the diameters are different. So, yeah, you'll see those labeled.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so I popped it up again, but I was using the micro mini tails. These guys right here. Cool. There you go.
Cool.
Right on. Cool. So for this fly, I'm going to use, this is the medium. the double barrel popperheads. I'm going to use the Ahrex Aberdeen Predator 1/0, so fairly large hook, but you can see here, this is a super skinny hook. So touching on the topic of using the thinnest hook that you can get away with, this might be a little light for most pike applications, but for bass, super strong, and really like, it's not going to bend out on you if you get a good hook set in there and you get good seating. I'm not worried about this. It's a little flexible here, but I'm not worried whatsoever about losing a fish or just bending out. They're very, very strong hooks. And once again, that's tiny or that really thin diameter hook is what I'm looking at. Cool. So to start this fly, I'm not going to forget this step. I'm going to take my popper head, I'm going to pierce it, and then have my mark on my hook shank of where I want to stop tying in my materials. So once again, take that bodkin. Bit of a repeat on every fly, but it's really a recurring theme here. Take the bodkin, find the center of that popper head, and come through the back. So I've done this with other popper heads like the Rainey's foam and things like that. But I find that these are actually a way softer material, and you're putting less effort to pierce through as well. So it's going to save your hands and your fingers, and it's be a more pleasurable experience.
And just to be clear, you say center down the center line of the fly, but toward the bottom of it, right?
Yeah. Correct. Yes, absolutely correct. Yeah, sorry, I should be more clear about that. So it is centered this way, but it is low this way. So I have my hole just towards the bottom here. If you go too low, you have run a chance of piercing through the bottom, so not great. So you want to have maybe a couple millimeters of space there just to work with. So I'm going to go through the back, through the front, make sure the hole is established. Cool. And there you go. I really do like that they don't pre-drill these and put a hole in them, so you actually have the ability to put things where you want to. Some popper heads do have the holes pre-drilled, so it almost forces you to put it there or fill that hole somehow. But this is a great way. So once again, I'm going to pre-fit this on here. Push this on. So I'm going to go a little easier, way easier actually. I'm going to go through one side first, and then the other, just to make sure that when I do put this on, there's no obstructions. I'm going to grab my Sharpie. I'll do both methods. I'll strike this with a Sharpie so I have a dark mark of where I want to stop tying. I'm getting a bit of ink on the back of the popper head, no big deal. And then if you want to tie or take this off and tie from there, great. If you want to take your thread and wrap in that burst just behind the popper head as well, that's super cool too. You can do both, up to you. And then you can just wrap your materials back or your thread back to start tying your materials in. Take my thread right to the back here where the bend is. And then once again, use my scissors and just clip that thread. Awesome. Next step, I'm going to use craft fur, sort of fake fur for the back of this fly. Really durable, available in a ton of colors. We just got a huge shipment in, so we can pick any color you want. How this works is you actually have the backing of material back here. It's like a sort of fabric type thing, sort of mesh, and this is all strung into it. So you pull this out, you pull out the piece you want, you take your scissors, and you give it like a little bit of a clip down here. If you find that you have too much, just kind of part it and take what you want away. There is almost an under fur with this stuff as well. So you have really long, straggly fibers out here. You have some under fur as well. I'm going to take a bit of the under fur out, just a little bit. You'll find your own with this once you start to tie with it, how much under fur you want, quotes under fur, and how long you want. I don't want those super long fibers there too, so I'm going to pull those out. So a nice sort of uniform bunch here. I'm then going to take the material, so look at my tail length. That's pretty good. Maybe a little bit longer. Take some securing wraps just here and going forward, just to secure this all down. Now, what I do have is that I have, it's fairly long. It's actually coming out for my tie-in point. Just grab your scissors, give that a clip, and you're just fine there. Remember, all this is going to be covered up. You don't need to have a pretty body at all. This can be pretty rough. Secure this all down. Next, I'm going to tie in my rubber legs. So I have rubber legs here, two-tone rubber legs, just because I like two tones. Give some sort of color differentiation, some black in there too. So quite nice. These are by Hairline. We have these in a ton of different colors in the shop. I'm going to grab 3 strands of this. So 3 strands, 1, 2, and 3. They're connected on both ends. Leave them connected. This is going to help you have a cleaner application and tie-in of these. So I'm going to do that same thing, wrap these behind the thread, as I would a Krystal Flash, which I will do later on for this fly too. Going to fold them over so they're even. Going to pull my thread up and secure on top. And there you go. They're now applied to your hook. Now we need to secure these things. So I'm going to go in for a few turns here. Going to pull these ones back and secure over them as well with my thread to have them in the backward angled direction. Now those things won't go anywhere. Those are great. You can see there's a bit of a gap here in the body. That's just fine. So that'll be covered up and not too important. These are fast, effective flies, not perfectly tied, filled body type things. Get my scissors, go for another clipping of the craft fur. And this one, I actually want a bit of that under fur to remain. So I'm going to clip it quite short here. I'm going to leave that. Actually, there's a lot there. I'm going to pull some of the under fur out. I'm going to pull those long straggly fibers out as well. And for this, I'm actually going to reverse tie this. And reverse tie means I'm actually going to tie this not in the same direction as the craft fur that I had before, but going to reverse this and tie it forward and then push it back into itself to give it a really big profile with a little bit of material. So I'm going to tie this in actually very, very close to my end and final tie-in point because I want it to butt up against the back of the popper. So it's a nice clean finish. So I'm going to pull this forward. I'm going to drop the material over top. I'm actually going to take this and actually slide the material over the side so it gets a nice, clean, fully round application. Do one loose wrap, then one securing wrap, and really sort of come down on that. And what you see here too is reverse tying this, you actually have a bit of a body built up here or prop for the forward material. So it'll give it a better profile as well. So a few wraps there. I'm going to then just kind of fluff this back, pull back on this material here, get it in the right direction, and then put a few wraps just in front of it to keep it where it is. I don't want to go too much further, but I do want to apply a couple of strands of Krystal Flash. So I'm going to grab Krystal Flash. I'm not going to use Flash Blue on this. Krystal Flash is a little more robust and rigid. It's not going to get as easily caught up in materials around the hook shank. It's going to be a little more, just a better material for the job. Cool. So same thing. I'm going to grab this, go behind the hook, sorry, behind the thread, find the same or match the lengths here. I'm going to grab that, bring it up top, wrap over top of it, do another wrap here, then actually splice these to the side, pull them back, and then wrap my thread on them to have them off the side of the fly and not going just over top as a wing. Cool. So there we go. That's perfect. I could trim everything out afterwards. I'll apply my thread to the forward shaft of the hook, my popper head on, and that's really the fly there. So I'll finish this off pretty quickly because you guys get the point of how to apply these popper heads now. And it's going to get my thread there. And if you find that your hook's moving around a fair amount, just grab your hook and secure it and make sure it's not going to wobble as much. It may seem like the hook's not strong. It's extremely strong. It's just the amount of leverage you have out here. So I'm just going to wrap, fill this forward end with thread, build up an anchoring point. A good friend of ours, Tim Darling, who actually showed us this Copic marker kit, and actually he lent us his kit to do our own poppers initially. He liked to do he used to do dams. He used to do like little nodes and do 3 or 4 nodes, increase your surface area there too. So not a bad idea if you're really worried about the super glue not binding this well. But I'll show you what he did here. He has one sort of node, a little higher spot, goes forward, wraps. I use my fingers as a guide to keep all the thread wraps stacked in one spot, then move forward again, and then just wrap another node here as well. So now you have even more surface area for that glue to bond to the popper head. Now, a couple of deck of 2-turn whip finishes to secure my thread temporarily. I'm going to grab that super glue once again, your best friend, and apply that right there. A fair amount. Got a small drop hanging underneath. That's totally cool. That'll be absorbed right in. Popper head face backwards and slide it right on and in. Now you have a wicked, wicked little fly there. Watch the super glue. I glued my hand to some of the craft fur, but I always find this stuff magically disappears overnight. Cool. So yeah, once again, squeeze, and now this goes off to dry and be secure. Now you'll notice that the rubber legs are still bound together. All you have to do is take your scissors, clip off the securing ends or bound up ends of the rubber legs, and you have a wicked little popper here now. Apply your eyes. I'll do that as batch afterwards. You guys don't want to see me do that. It's a frustrating job. I don't like applying eyes. My hands get glued like crazy. I start swearing a lot. Not fun. But there you go. Great little popper. Once again, super fast. You can tie these really quickly at home. I'm talking through this. If you got good at this, you could probably tie this popper in under 3 minutes. That's pretty darn good and pretty darn fast for a popper.
And awesome. If you don't want to demo it, that's cool. But attaching the eyes, just a little drop of super glue and then eye over top.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I should do one. I'll do one now. I have 2 other flies to tie. So it's
Before
really a jam-packed session with lots of patterns. But I'll put this back in the vise and show you guys. And you'll see me glue my hands to my fly a couple times.
it's all right. As you're doing that, we had 2 questions, and they
Yes.
relate to each other. But yeah, so we want to hear basically what do you like for leader setup, and the second question would be just generally how do you fish a pop?
Oh, okay. That's it. Those 2 loaded questions, guys. So I've seen a bunch of people out there just use straight lengths of monofilament. And in this case, I would definitely suggest if you're going to go that route, use nylon, not fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon sinks, and you want everything to be buoyant here. These are poppers on the surface, and they don't want them to be sunk down because your leader is quite heavy. I don't really use a straight length. I actually really like tapered leaders because tapered leaders are based upon physics and turning over things. If you use a straight piece of monofilaments, it doesn't have that force and mass behind it to really turn, or the ability to turn that larger fly over. So I use a lot of the Rio bass leaders, the big nasty leaders by Rio, and the 9-ish foot lengths, 6 foot lengths are totally good too. Fishing poppers, fish tend not to be super leader shy, and those 6 foot ones are super powerful. You can even build them out with other material, make them longer as well. If you're fishing for pike with poppers, which we actually have a pike-sized popper coming down the pipe, you want to use the less sinky material you can. It sounds like a weird way to say it, but something with not a ton of mass is going to draw your fly down. So like 20-pound Rio wire bite is really good for that because it's not super heavy. That's a great material to use for that. Your 60, 80-pound fluorocarbons, that's a lot of mass. That's a lot of sinking power in a sense, like a sink tip almost. That will draw your fly down. So use the lightest wire you can attached to monofilament backing. Sort of backing in terms of your leader material. That's what I meant there. Cool. Hopefully that covers that one.
And
In terms,
sorry,
sorry.
was there any difference rivers versus lakes in your setup?
Good question. That's a great question. Because of drag and things like that, it's like a slightly longer leader does I find work a little better to not have your fly pulled away too soon and downriver. So using a longer leader definitely does help. Mending, an aerialized mend really helps on rivers too as you're casting to keep everything from being dragged down and swept through and sort of unnatural looking. If you have heavily pressured fish, that fish may recognize that something lands in the water, then sweeps out and gets popped and sunk back out, may be very unnatural. But in terms of rivers, I would say a huge difference, maybe a longer leader.
It's almost like just a dry fly.
Sorry, Chris, what was that?
Almost think of it like a dry fly, like similar kind of method.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
Yep, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual weight, so my super glue here, small drop inside of the eye. Actually might have a little bit too much. I do have some scrap material I can hang around and sort of soak that up with, but let's try with what I have in there. I'm going to grab what's great here is that these are pre-established holes for your eyes. Now, these popper heads actually have a recommendation on the bag of using the 4mm eye. So I have 4mm eyes I'm going to apply to these flies. I'm going to drop one in. I'm going to use a bodkin. These are pretty small eyes. Bigger ones are easy to not get stuck with your hands. But I use a bodkin and actually just maneuver this eye in to the popper. My hands are already stuck in one spot. There we go. See, there we go. Glue my hands everywhere. There we go.
As you're doing that, yeah, just comments on fishing poppers in general.
Yes, fishing poppers. Poppers are, as I mentioned, are an extremely aggressive way to fish. There's nothing shy about a popper. So there we go. It's going to push this in. I'm going to hold this in with my bodkin and not my fingers, because I'll glue my fingers to the eye and the fly. Give it a couple second count. So there's one eye applied.
Nice.
Flip that around. Having a rotating vise like this is super handy for this application. So the biggest thing with poppers I find is people overfish them, and they're way too aggressive with poppers. These can be spooky. You can scare the crap out of a fish with a popper. Imagine a fish is in a super slow, boggy area on a river or lake. All of a sudden, you get this thing slap the surface. It's going to get the attention of the fish. Oh, what the hell's that? And get the curiosity peaked. But if it's super unnatural to a fish to see that thing hit the water, you could freak the hell out of that thing and see it run for the lake over. If you see this thing, belly up on shore and hit the next lake, you've done something wrong. But I would say try to go a little more subtle than you think. So cast out let that popper hit the ground, hit the water. And actually interesting is we can have a whole other topic and conversation on the different types of popper heads and the sounds they make as they hit the water as well. And even the epoxied heads hit harder than the non-epoxied heads. And it goes into a huge crazy thing. So even having materials in the back like this, which will slow down the fly's descent as it hits the water, will actually make it a less spooky fly to fish too, versus a hard material back here, just rubber legs. So if fishing in skinny water, like shallow water, use a less aggressive fly. Fishing really deep water and you draw fish up from maybe 15 or 20 feet of water, then a louder fly might be the better way to go. But definitely cast out, let the fly hit the water and sit there and just sit there and just sit there and let it painfully sit there and sit there some more and let those rings dissipate. And once the rings have dissipated, maybe even wait some more if you want to. But as those rings are gone, then make one. I usually find one small, tiny little twitch, just like a proof of life. So if fish does come up and it's staring at this fly, it's like, what the hell is this thing? It's inspecting it from maybe a foot or two away, or maybe right next to it, and that thing just kind of goes for like a little tiny, like boop, little kick. We see that the tail just kind of like wiggle a little bit. That could be enough for the fish to then strike, like, holy shit, it's real, and jumps on it. So I would say, cast it out there, let it hit the water, let it do absolutely nothing for a long time, and then give it one small, tiny little twitch. And then after that, you can start being more aggressive, maybe a few more pops, do a bigger popper splash, let it sit again. But I find a lot of folks, they fish poppers way, way, way too aggressively. So chill out, calm down. I love seeing that splash and take, but really those subtle ones. And so often you see big fish come up and they'll inspect the fly, to look at it. And after that little kind of that little shake, that little twitch, they'll go and suck it down. And I find big fish have smaller takes than big fish have more subtle takes than smaller fish. Smaller fish tend to be really aggressive, but the big fish just kind of go and suck it down off the top of the water. Oh, so we have one. Sorry. Good question. I would say start off a little more subtle first. Always go subtle. I find for poppers and even skinny water and big water, is because a subtle presentation won't spook a fish. On a subsequent, say a follow-up cast, you may want to go a little more aggressive to get that fish that may be indecisive. But so always go more subtle first, because you can't unspook a fish. They can always entice a fish later on with a more aggressive presentation. They get to a point of the day where I just don't fish poppers anymore. If it's too windy, they're a pain to cast. You're putting yourself in danger by having this big foam thing being taken by the wind and right back at you. So I tend to, on windy days, don't really fish a ton of poppers on choppy days. But yes, if you're in deeper water and there's a chop, go for a bigger presentation, a bigger splash. And if you're in sort of shallower water too, you can be a little more aggressive, but at the same time, those fish just might be spooky. So go subtle first, and then work up to a different presentation as well. Cool. All right. So to apply those eyes again, get to the next one. A tiny little drop of super glue inside of that well. The tiniest amount, you need tons. Pick that eye off of the sheet here. Oh, see, super glued my hand to another eye as well. I'm just not good at this, and I'm okay about that. All right, I'm going to slide this one in. I'm going to push it in with my bodkin. Not going to breathe too heavily. These are quite light. I'm going to slide this in, and then take that bodkin and push down. And there we go, it's secured. So that's how you apply eyes to these popper heads. There's pre-established holes, which makes a super easy job. A small tiny drop of super glue, and then use your bodkin to put those in. Actually learned this from Nick Groves, using your bodkin to really push down and secure your eyes so you don't have your fingers getting glued all the time. So useful tool. This one's by Loons. We sell lots at the shop. They're quite good. Right on. So next fly. Any other questions?
Nope, not at the moment. All good. Okay, one more from me. Continue though. I'm not going to hold you up too much. If you are fishing, say, a bigger body of water, maybe with less fish density, especially in maybe deeper water, thoughts about visibility of the fly? Like, is a fly with more material, like hanging off the back subsurface, going to be more visible to a fish from further away than something that's more buoyant and just sitting on the surface?
I feel like you have an answer for this, Chris.
Well, that's my method. That's a theory of mine when it comes to fishing, and I'm just sort of equating the two here. So like
Yep.
I always think of a merger or something subsurface as being more visible to a fish because it can see it from a horizontal line from further away if it's not looking up at it. Do you think that plays in
Yeah.
poppers?
I think the commotion your popper makes
Yep.
is way more visible than anything that's subsurface.
Sure.
And so if you have a popper on the water and you make a pop, the rings from the pop extend out maybe meters.
Yep.
And so if you have a fish that's in the water, maybe even like 40, 60 feet away, it's going to see those rings more so than that popper. And it's going to see the rings and investigate what's causing those rings
Yep.
versus having anything dangle subsurface and hang out there. Sure, that might be a trigger for it. If you look at a frog hangs out in the water kind of like that. It doesn't hang up, generally speaking, like straight off like that itself. So it could be a food cue or like a feed response, seeing something that's kind of dangling in the water. So it gives body to it. So if you have fish that are feeding on a lot of frogs, maybe a popper that sits and dangles downward is going to actually be a better thing because it's going to recognize that as food versus that as food. So yeah, it could be that. But I really think this just the action on the surface, those rings that are put out there, the noise that it makes is the biggest drawing factor versus like a dangling body in the water.
Yep.
Yeah. So my thoughts there, anyways.
Yeah, great.
Cool.
All right.
Right on. Any more, Chris? Any more
Nope,
stumpers there?
Hold on for now.
All right.
We need to tie some. People
cool. Right on. So we have 2 more flies to tie. Next one, a lot of fun. It's another big fly. I love fishing big flies, tying big flies, but also small ones too. They all have their place. Subtle fish, subtle presentation, fish that are maybe spooky, searching water, big bloops, big splashes. You'd be amazed what eats big flies and what eats small flies. As you know, like trout eats tiny things all day. Pike will eat small leeches, things like that. Then also you catch bass this size and a popper this size. So, you never know what's going to be below that fly, what's going to take your fly. So the next fly I'm going to showcase just up here for a second. It's a diver pattern. So a different type of sort of popper in a sense. Not a popper, but a surface presentation that has a different aspect. It's not going to splash and sploosh water forward. It's going to push down this head back. Your head shape is going to push water off the back, and you get a different sound. It's more of a whoop than it is a pop. As you can tell, I'm great with sound effects. So there's definitely a lot of sounds that poppers make, and you can describe there. But you'll see this one; it'll push water over the top, and then suck air down. That air rises too, which is a big draw for these. And like the Dullbrook diver, super famous fly with that head shape to it. So yeah, this one's simple too. A couple hackles, Marabou, Krystal Flash, recurring theme of being easy and fast. So I'm going to drop this one off. Going to put on the correct hook for this one. Get my materials lined up. And if you're looking at tying flies fast and efficiently, line up your materials in a row, like an assembly line versus looking through all your bags and finding things. And I'm super guilty of tying one fly and then modifying it slightly. Then the next one just a little bit more, looking for things. So I'm not the most efficient fly tyer. If you want to be really, really efficient, line things up, produce 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the same fly, and then sort of go on to your next thing versus kind of changing small parts around. I have difficulty not doing that, unfortunately. Cool. So this one, chartreuse marabou, strung marabou. This one here, I'm looking at the extra large diver heads from Whalesback. We have large, mediums, and smalls, maybe extra small too. Too many products to keep track of in the shop, to be honest, but Chris can inform me on that. I'm going to use for the eyes, the living eyes once again. These are in fire, and these are what size are these here? These are the 8.5 millimeters. And for the hook, I'm using the Ahrex. I love these hooks. They're super sharp, strong, and these also give you the really appropriate hook gap as well for this type of fly. So I'll show you why I choose these. So this is for big bass. These are for pike as well. So I'm going to grab this predator hook out here. So long shank, which is just fine with these because these popper heads are quite large. They have a ton of buoyancy. They're going to hold up a lot of material behind them. Well, these diver heads. So having a hook that's a little thicker gauge, a little longer, is not going to compromise how this floats, the floatiness of this fly, the buoyancy of it itself. Get rid of this. Superlude some craft root to my vise, but that's just fine. That's all right. Using it well. So once again, hook goes into the vise, secure it down so it's very well bound in here. See, once again, this sort of moves around a bit. It's a little bouncy, but that's just fine. When we start applying things, we just hold our hook a little closer to our attachment points and remove that bounce. Now, this popper head does not have a forward hole, but does have a recess in the back that guides you where to put, where it goes onto your hook, and you can tie materials into that point as well. For this, I'm going to actually just go down the middle because these already have a pre-cut. It's not fully round, it's also pre-cut on the bottom to give you more gap down here as well and to give you that action in the water. So already established a hook gap retainer here. I'm gonna take my bodkin, slide it down the back, going straight forward. Once again, keeping my fingers way away from the point of that thing and sliding it forward and just penetrating just like that. I'm gonna go forward again through that hole I created and give it a bit more of a twist and make sure I have a bit of space in there just to apply this onto my hook. Now, here's a cool trick. So when I put this on here, the well that you can tie materials into or have materials in is actually fairly far back. So how do you know where that is? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, apply this forward, just make sure this fits onto my hook, which it absolutely does. But I'm going to then reverse this. And I'm going to pull this forward, and it's going to stop naturally where the hook eye won't go any further. But this gives you a more accurate idea of where that well sort of ends inside of the body and gives you the right tying point. So I'm going to take my Sharpie, you can mark that up exactly where you want your thread to be, or you start applying your thread to your hook just there. And you know that's where you don't want to tie forward of at any point. So clip off my thread, pull the popper head or diver head off, put that aside, and start tying my thread back a bit. Now, there aren't too many materials in here. I don't need to actually go all the way back for this fly. I can start tying materials in just here. And having a bit of a bulkhead of materials towards the very front of this popper, because there's a well space, it's actually better for attaching and securing this. So I don't want to go too far back and have too much of a gap. It actually does help having a bulkhead of materials just here. So easy fly once again. Marabou, strung Marabou. You probably have a ton of this stuff already in your collection. I've had this material for ages, actually. Yes. Can't wait to get rid of this. So I have many packs of the same material kicking around, so I can't wait to sort of minimize what I have here to use my materials. I'm a fly tying junkie, material junkie, so it's a bit of an issue. That's a big wad of Marabou. A fair amount of that, and that's just fine. It's going to get really soft in the water and move. I want a bit of material behind there.
How many feathers?
So I'm going to take this. Sorry?
How many feathers would you say that is roughly?
That is
4?
1, 2, 3. Yeah, I guess there's 3 in there, so a fair amount. There's 3 feathers. And every pack of Marabou is different if they're thinner or bigger or fuller, but a nice sort of clump. Once again, not a subtle pattern, so I want a bunch of Marabou in there. The Marabou is also going to help keep my hackles of this fly separated and out as well. So threads down. I'm going to take my thread here. I'm going to work this down, find my tail length, and that's pretty appropriate for this diver. Once again, this is not clean. This is not pretty. This is just a really functional tie-in. Get a bunch of Marabou down. I'm going to start slashing this down. I'm going to do one loose wrap and some tighter wraps going forward as well. So super messy, and that's just fine. Super glue is also going to help secure and bind everything together as well. Super glue is my best friend. Cool. So a big, huge, wafty tail of this. Got to get my scissors. I'm going to get you some thicker scissors, some more durable ones for the head here. This is a pair from Loon. I'm going to take them forward, give it a big old clip. There we go. So what I've done here is I've also left that bulkhead of material I'm going to tie over and glue. So it's going to help secure that diver head as well. So perfect, done. That's the Marabou. Nice. Cool. Next up, I'm going to use, put in some Krystal Flash. I'm going to use some of this clear Krystal Flash or pearlescent. This is UV pearl. I'm going to grab a few strands. I like to clip the side of my Krystal Flash bags and sort of tease a few strands out instead of having to deal with a whole hank of it just kind of loosely around. I'm going to have about 8 to 10 strands here. Fairly flashy fly. Cut those off. Do the same thing, apply them around the back of the hook. Match the ends. Bring them up, tie them down, splay them off to the side. So they're on the side of the fly, not the top, not a wing, and just lash those down. Really, this is not pretty, guys. This is a really, really rough sort of fly here, but that's just fine. The fish don't care how this looks right now. I'm going to tie this forward And from here, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to tie in a few hackles. These are off of a big, I guess, a neck. You can use Flymen. You could use Strung neck hackle. You can use a ton of hackles. Doesn't really matter where you get it from, but nice long complementary colors. I like this grizzly to offset and give some contrast to this fly as well. Now what I want to do to have the right sizing, make them longer, shorter. It's up to you. Not too short. It'll look kind of off and weird and lose function, but I want to have these maybe just hang out from the back of the Marabou a bit. I'm going to have 2 hackles for one side, 2 hackles for the other side. I'm going to double them up, lay them on top of each other, match the ends. Let's match the ends like that. I'm going to size them out. I'm going to find exactly where I want to start stripping off materials from this hackle, exposing just the stem. I'm going to put them onto one side and wrap and lash those down. Now leave these attached. There's a bit of a trick I want to show you later on for securing your hackles even further. I'm going to grab the other 2 set for the other side. I'm going to match those to the length of the other side, just here. Strip those off. And there he goes. They're fairly well matched in length. I'm going to pull those over top, put the thread over top, start wrapping. Those are lashed down. Once again, huge bulkhead material just here. It's not pretty, but it's functional. I'm going to take those stems, going to fold them back. I'll do the ones on the side, then the other ones, and lash those down. Then they flip these back into themselves and lash that down again. So there's way, way less chance of these hackles being pulled out. I can do it with jungle call. I can do it with all sorts of things if you're tying flies, just to make sure those nails or feathers don't come dislodged. All right, clip those off. And essentially, that fly is nearly finished except for the popper head. Once again, you have Marabou, you have craft fur, you have hackles, and your diver head. Done. Put your eyes on afterwards, and that's your completed fly. So really, like, way, way, way less thought than tying these in. I think a lot of folks do. Back in the day when you had to spin these with deer hair, that's a way more complicated job, way more time consumptive. And in that case, for even a person like myself, who's a fairly good fly tyer, I'd rather just buy the flies and tie the flies. Just way more time savings. But there is a lot of beauty and a lot of fun you can have with spinning deer hair and making your own flies there. But for the time saving, I would just rather do that. Now, once again, I think a thicker thread like the big game or the uni big fly uni big fly thread would be the better thread to build up the body here. But I'm going to use what I have in my bobbin right now. Cool. So a fair amount. Good. Do a 2-turn whip finish.
So I think we're fairly familiar with this step, so I'll let you just kind of motor through it. But we had another Merkin. He was wondering if you can use an articulated shank to make a larger platform.
You can, absolutely. Absolutely. There's actually a very well-known fly from Schultz Outfitters called the Swingin' D. And it uses a shank out the back as well with rattles, and it's quite a long one, but you absolutely can. You absolutely, you definitely can. If you want to use, I would use the articulation out the back and not the front, but you could use it off the front as well. You would have more weight, I would think, if you used the dye, like say the foam head on the shank first, and you would have like this drop a fair amount back and be too heavy. Maybe you can get caught up in itself. So I would tend to tie the fly with the popper head on the hook, and then have the shank behind there to have an extended body back there as well. No problem doing that. Chris, you tie like beast flies. I think you could even probably tie off monofilament like a beast fly, and then do that as well. You could extend the body that way too, to even reduce the amount of weight because you're tying on monofilament and not on a metal shank. Cool. So there's your fly. There's your diver. Once again, super easy. All you have to do is apply your eyes on this fly, and then you're set. You're off to catch pike and big bass, big largemouth. Any questions on this fly?
Nope. I think that's about it. Pretty straightforward.
Cool.
Cool looking fly.
Right on. So we have one last one. One last fly. I'm going to reverse the head of that first fly and tie a bit of a mouse pattern. I think it's a really cool way to use these popper heads too. So you're not just stuck in tying in one method. So I'll clean my bench up here just a little bit. Get rid of a bunch of this stuff here because it's getting a little out of control like most tying benches do. It took me about half an hour to clear my bench last night to have a better working surface today. So if you're a messy fly tyer, you're not alone. All right. I do apologize for speaking fairly quickly. I had a lot of coffee this morning, so definitely a little quick. All right.
All good.
Cool. So the next one is a Mises pattern, a mouse. I know Gab, a former employee of ours and a great friend, he's a mouse fanatic and I think he was going to like this fly a fair amount. This guy here is brilliant. It's a rabbit strip tail. It's using a streamer brush or a brush from RD Distribution. I just add H2O and then a reverse tied, a reverse used double barrel popper head here. Super easy. I'll show you how this works. Really quick, a lot of fun. So I'm going to grab my hook, which is a Dohiku streamer hook, size number 2, barbless for other barbless fisheries, easy on and off for fish. Actually, an interesting note to talk about barbless hooks is that when you do fish with a barbless hook versus a debarbed hook or a pinch barb hook, is you actually remove that bump that usually exists with a pinched barb. So these will penetrate easier into a fish, and you have a better hookup ratio. I find it seats better in the fish. So there we go. Using a barbless by design hook is always, I find, better than this debarbed. There we go. So nice and secure in my bites. Awesome. This brush exactly is, let's see here. It's a 1.5 inch polar fiber streamer brush. So the 1.5 for the size of fly. Nice. But first, before I even do that, I'm going to get the brush on there. I'm going to get my popper head primed and ready for application.
Which size head was that? Is that small?
This one is the small. Yeah, the small. Cool. There you can see that there, right on. To be used with the 3mm eyes and hook number 6. Obviously, I'm using a hook number 2. At your discretion type of thing. You know, pick your poison, pick your purpose. So bodkin once again, I'm going to go centered this way, and then I guess quite low once again to keep that gap open a fair amount. So I'm going to take my bodkin, I'm going to push that in, create that hole. Once again, if you want to do a ton to these flies, just do this step all at once. Get over it. It's not a fun step. You have better efficiency there as well. So work that back and forth a bit. Make sure that hole opens up just a little bit more. All right, and then once more, I'm going to apply this onto my hook just to make sure that everything does slide in once that glue is there without any sort of hiccups there. Now, same thing, you want to grab your Sharpie, you can jump inside and make that mark of where you want to stop tying. Because these are now, this is now a bevel. So the bevel is now inside of this bevel of this head as where my tie-in point is going to be, my last tie-in point. So if I were to tie just in here, I would be not maximizing my tie-in for this. So taking that Sharpie, just striking off inside gives me an exact point of where I want to stop tying my materials. So pull.
Alternatively, I guess, sorry, just flip it around and use the thread technique on the nose. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that as well. Absolutely, lots of ways to do it. Yeah, I just want to showcase both, so you can do pick your poison in a sense.
For sure.
All right, still too much coffee. Slow down, Rob.
Too much to get.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to find that tie-in point there. I'm going to take my thread and just start to wrap backwards. The first thing I'm going to tie in besides my thread is going to be a piece of this micro rabbit strip. And you can tie this in white, you can tie this in gray, you can tie this in whatever color you want. Have a hot head on there if you want to, different color heads. One, have fun with, fish to, having a color on there and fish may respond to the color as a hot spot. If you want a more subtle pattern, a standard sort of unified look to it, then go with the monochrome sort of look to it. If you want a gray body and a gray head, you can get the white popper heads and then color out the popper head as well. Cool, so I'm gonna grab that rabbit strip here. Hairline micro rabbit strips, we sell tons of these. We have quite a good stock at the moment. I'm going to find a gigantic piece of this. And what I actually like to do is find the very forward end of this and tie it in and then trim to length. So I'm not cutting pieces of rabbit and then having small pieces hang around. So I'm going to actually waste way, way, way less rabbit by doing that, by then cutting a piece, then trimming that back here and there. I'm going to be way more efficient with my materials. I'm going to take my scissors, going to find a nice tail length, maybe keep that about here or so. Yeah, there we go. Going to cut this in a bit of an angled fashion. Give it a bit of a taper there to it. I'm sure a straight cut is just well, but I like cutting from underneath so I don't clip that end hair off as well. If you go with straight cut, you end up having a square end, which is, I think a taper is quite nice. Looks more like a tail than a straight piece of cut there. Right on. So next step is going to grab the streamer brush out of the pack. It's quite long. So I want to see what this looks like. It actually has all these fibers, polar fiber and flash tied onto a wire. And all you have to do is wrap this forward, and you have a really elaborate body. If you want to make this on your own, you have to get the wire out, lay materials down, spin the wire, then tease it out. It's already done for you, so it makes life super, super, super easy. Cool. So I'm going to expose some of that wire that's built on. I'm going to lash it onto my hook here. A few thread wraps right to the back, and work this forward. That's super secure now. To my forward tie-in point, I'm going to wrap this forward while stroking the materials back. Don't want them captured underneath because it's going to waste the brush. I get a sparse body, and it won't be as full. Then you have a ton of stuff to tie over as well. Not great, so always stroke it back as you're going forward. And these brushes, I tell you, make tying a bunch of flies way, way faster and way easier as well. I love making my own brushes, but once again, that time factor, I don't have a ton of time with running the shop. And then like having a small puppy, I have to walk a few times a day. And then just, other hobbies I have as well. So I want to make sure I'm maximizing my efficiency behind the vise. Wrap that forward, very full body here. So those are nearly touching wraps. You could do it sparser and then not do touching wraps. But you can see I'm building up the body, the mouse body. I have the tail, the mouse body. I'm nearly done, coming up right to the front. I'm gonna grab my thread, do one wrap over, second wrap over, third wrap over. Make sure that's very secure. A couple more just to make sure. I don't want it springing out. I'd start swearing if that happened. And that's not good. It's a PG show, guys. So I'm gonna grab my thread. Gonna wrap that head where my head's gonna go. Just build up that thread dam once again, the thread base. And this is the last vlog, guys, so I'm nearly done. So if any questions, this is your time to ask questions. Hopefully I've sort of shown how easy it is to tie poppers and other, this pattern tying using these preformed popper heads. So everyone, I think if you ask anyone, what's the biggest thing that you don't have these days, and that's a lot of time. So here we go. Trim that off. My popper head that I already have pre-bored. Once again, my best friend, super glue. Well, it's best friend for fly tying, not best friend to my fingers. And I'm gonna slide this on. And now I have a wicked little mouse pattern. And then squeeze down, squeeze the size, get that glue dispersed in that fly. And that is a really super fun, super quick mouse pattern for bass, for trout. And I cannot wait to fish these things come opening season for both species. Oh, there we go. Cool. And if you want, what you can do is also grab a little brush. This one's by Loon. It's like a fur comb. And just sort of brush it out to make sure all your fibers are not just stuck underneath each other. To give it more of a body shape to make sure it's going to work quite well. There we go. So any questions, guys?
Cool. No, I think that covers it. If people do have questions, though, Rob and I both work at the shop at Drifts.
Yeah, you can reach out anytime. Yeah,
for sure. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, now you just have to tie and dream about warmer nights.
Exactly. Bass season is further away than trout season, but bass season for me is my favorite time of year. Grew up fishing bass. That's what I learned to fly fish with. And I cannot wait to get back in those waters and do that again. Fish the Saugeen, the Maitland, up at my family's cottage in Muskoka. I can't wait to get up there again, as long as it's safe to do so. Definitely being very COVID conscious, but it's I cannot wait. Gotta say.
Yep. Awesome. Glad to see you're getting more coffee. You deserve it.
Yes. Woo. All right. Go team.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Rod. That was a lot of fun. It was good.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Hopefully everyone has learned a fair amount. You can always rewatch this, rewind it, and sort of pause and review some skills. Once again, any questions, find us at Drift Outfitters. You can email us, phone us, and all the products that we did have on our flies today, you can find on our web store. If you want a package put together, you can email us, say, hey, I want to tie this popper. We'll get that sent right out to you as well, or available for curbside pickup.
For sure. And I'll update the description just after this is posted with the patterns and all the items and stuff, so you guys can get that. And looking forward, next week we've got a few more streams coming up. We've got Ian Troop on Thursday. He's doing his third and final episode tying with CDC. Then next Saturday we have a friend of ours, JP, on. He's going to be going over some of the things that he's learned in his time fly fishing, and then a few more just down the road from that too. So I hope everyone can tune in for those. And with that, have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Cool. Right on. Take care.
See you guys.